We've seen in recent episodes how destructive addiction can be. But addiction is not always obvious. In fact, we often consider addictions to be to substances. And perhaps the only addiction that is both well known and not substance based is gambling addiction. Most addictions will be physiological, with the body having become so used to processing a certain substance that the body develops a biological need for that substance, making quitting that substance that much more difficult. But in some cases, addictions can be largely psychological. But even the psychological addictions can also be somewhat physiological, in the sense that meeting the need of that addiction will release endorphins that the body develops a habit for. A great example of this, and thanks to Robert Palmer for reminding me that you can indeed be addicted to love. But anything that we can develop habits for can become addictions. Some people claim to be addicted to TV shows. You have nail biting, addiction to exercise, and the list goes on. And it is one such story that will show us how much power a psychological addiction can have. When a man prioritizes his need for his obsessive fix, even above his own family. This is the disturbing case of Grant Amato, and this is Murderous Road. We're heading to the year 2019 for this case. And guess where we're going? Yep, it's the bizarro crime capital of the world, that being Florida. And within this sprawling and seemingly batshit crazy state, we're heading to a small area in Seminole County named Chulliota. Chulliota has an area of about 2.2 square miles, or 5.7 square kilometers, and about 20% of that is made up of water, which is thanks largely to Lake Mills. Chulliota had a population of just over 2,500 people in the 2020 census, though it is only about 20 miles from the centre of Orlando. Orlando was the birthplace for Grant Tiernan Amato on May the 20th, 1989. He was born to Chad and Margaret Amato. He was raised in Tuliota with his brother Cody, and the two were extremely close. His father was a clinical pharmacist and his mother was an operations manager. Now Margaret had another son called Jason from a prior relationship, but when Jason was 3 years old, Chad Amato adopted him. As Grant grew up, he became interested in health matters, as did his brother, perhaps due to having a pharmacist for a dad. And as I said, Grant's brother Cody was similarly inclined. And both boys joined the weightlifting team when they attended Timber Creek High School. After high school, the interest in health continued for both boys, and both boys pursued nursing studies at the University of Central Florida. After both had successfully completed their initial nursing studies, they both decided to further train as nurse anaesthetists. But it was only Cody who completed this further study, with Grant dropping out. But even though he did not achieve additional qualifications, Grant was able to secure a nursing position with Advent Health Orlando. So much so happily ever after and wonderful. So as the brothers headed into 2018, they were both living with their parents in Tuliota, while half-brother Jason lived elsewhere, but not too far away. To all observers, Grant and Cody were successful in their careers, and they did not cause any notable problems for their parents. Yet. But 2018 was the year when cracks started to show in Grant Amato's facade, indicating some issues mostly around control and narcissism that would continue to grow with time. It was in June of 2018 that Grant was suspended from his job under suspicion of stealing and improperly administering medication to patients. And the circumstances of his suspension were compounded by Grant Amato allegedly admitting to having suicidal thoughts. And while police officers said he did not meet the criteria to be a danger to himself or others around him, they did conclude that there was evidence to the claim of improper medicine administration. And the reasoning behind this was that hospital staff had found 8 empty vials of the sedative propofol, which had not been ordered by any doctors. In 2 rooms that Grant had been overseeing, that being where these vials had been found. And when questioned during his suspension, he said that he had administered the drug to patients who were not being adequately relaxed. As you do. The hospital then fired him, and police officers subsequently arrested him for the theft of the sedatives. And this happened after the investigation concluded, but those charges were later dropped. And while the charges were ultimately dropped, the incident left an indelible stain on Grant Amato's career, meaning, quite understandably, that health agencies were reluctant to employ him in any capacity. Now, the reason the charges were dropped is not officially known, but it was an indication of the family support that Grant had, that the family spent $8,000 on a top attorney for the shamed caregiver. And in fact, it was his brother Cody who had paid for the attorney, showing that family support for Grant extended to Cody in an incredible show of fraternal love and support. Now 19 years old and with no major qualifications outside of the nursing field, Grant Amato found it difficult to get any sort of appropriate work. So he did the sensible and obvious thing. What's that? Further training, you say? Why no, dear viewer, far more obvious than that. He decided to become a Twitch streamer and full-time gamer. But desperately wanting to support their child get back on track, Grant's family paid for all of the equipment and setup that he needed to begin his journey as a professional streamer. But this was where Grant Amato's already less than adequate relationship with the truth became ever more estranged. His streams were very few and far between, and instead he used his fancy new technology to watch porn. And while some people claim an addiction to porn, Grant Amato's porn viewing was just a gateway to what would become his true addiction. That being a cam girl named Sylvia Venceslalova, who was better known by her screen alias simply as Sylvie. Now, for the uninitiated, a cam girl is simply a girl who poses and performs for a webcam. But there is generally a more explicit bent to how the term is used, being used typically to refer to women who perform explicit acts on camera, typically for payment of some kind. And it was the payment aspect that would become the ultimate breaking point for Grant Amato. But I'm getting ahead of myself here, so back to where we were in the story. Grant Amato, during his alleged early steps into a career as a streamer, would begin frequenting a website called My Free Cams, a misnomer if ever there was one. On this site, users could buy tokens and then use those tokens to view streams by the available girls, one of whom was Sylvie. And from his first experience with the Bulgarian model, he became completely infatuated with her. But unfortunately for him, her time came at a financial cost, and it was a very steep one. He needed tokens to pay by the minute for her virtual company. He would spend up to 4 hours a night on the website, buying up to 5,000 tokens at a time at a cost of over $600. Sylvie's shows would cost 90 tokens per minute. But Grant was masquerading as a successful gamer, not short of a bob or two, and he would send her lingerie and sex toys, as well as paying an exorbitant amount for her time. But as we know, Grant had no job as a result of his forcing sedatives on patients, as you do. So he had no significant income. So if he was to keep up his charade, he would need money. So he would steal credit cards from his family, and if ever caught, he would claim they were for starting up his Twitch career. But within just a few months, Grant had spent $200,000 of his family's money on Sylvie. Christ almighty, he could have had me for far less than that. Don't get ideas, alright. But even now the family refused to turn their backs and give up on the desperate fuckwit. Cody, the ever-loving and supportive brother, shelled out $10,000 so he and Grant could go on an already planned trip to Japan, with Cody hoping that the vacation would allow Grant to clear his head. And then after the 10-day trip, they could seek treatment and therapy for the cockwomble. I know I've come in early with the cockwomble, but you'll see it's well deserved. But the financial toll that Grant had taken on the family was having a severe emotional toll. The tension between Grant and his father increased. Chad Amato was becoming impatient with Grant's inability to find a job. The stress he experienced from seeing his retirement nest egg being handed over to a woman his son had never even met in person was becoming too much to contain, and he put intense pressure on Grant to take responsibility and start making money to pay towards the astronomical debt. But Grant had only one thing in his mind, and that one thing was Sylvie. He had to maintain contact with her at all costs. After one particular argument, Grant walked out of the house, and his family reported him missing to the police simply because he was presenting as extremely depressed. Now, far from running away, Grant went to the home of his aunt, Donna Amato, and she allowed him to stay over in order to keep him safe. She noticed that something was wrong with her nephew. But following this kindness, Donna began to notice money disappearing from her bank account. And at that point, she thought that she had been hacked or scammed, but eventually figured out that all of this was down to Grant. Chad and Margaret begged Donna not to press charges. They shouldn't have, but that's what they did. And Cody even promised to cover all the money stolen by his brother. Quite how Cody still managed to support his dead loss of a brother after all that had happened is beyond me, but my God, what a good-hearted young man. Chad actually broke down in tears during this stressful time, and this was the only time that Donna Amato had heard her brother-in-law cry in the 27 years that she knew him. And Chad further explained that he had to remortgage his house to cover $150,000 of Grant's debt. But with all of that having happened already, the family still tried to help the wayward Fart Blossom. Showing another massive level of support, his family sent Grant to a rehab facility for porn and internet addiction, which cost them $15,000. And this was another cost that Cody took on in his efforts to help his brother. He was allowed to return home after a couple of weeks, but was given a zero-tolerance ultimatum. And the requirements were: Grant had to get a job, he could not get online at night, he could not have a cell phone, he could not contact Sylvie, he had to attend therapy, and the family were done covering any of Grant's debts. This last point coming after Chad had let another fraudulent line of credit go through, but for him that was the last straw. But Grant didn't care about consequences. His only thought was staying in contact with the cam girl that he was obsessed with. And with this in mind, Grant was able to convince his mother to let him use her phone. And then naturally he duly used it to make contact with the webcam model. Upon learning this, Chad ordered Grant to pack up his things and leave the house. On January the 24th, 2019, when Grant was ostensibly meant to be gathering his belongings in order to move out, he decided on a different plan, he said ominously. While his mother was working on the computer, Grant walked up behind her and shot her in the head. He then waited for his father to get home, and his father would be a more difficult assignment, since he was usually armed. So Grant needed to take him by surprise. So when his father arrived home and walked into the kitchen, Grant shot him twice in the head. But the job wasn't quite finished yet, since his brother Cody, who as we know had propped Grant up financially for years, Cody was still living at home with the family. But Grant had a plan, not just to kill his brother, but to get away with 3 murders. When Cody finished his nursing shift and made his way home, he had no way of knowing he was walking into an ambush. Cody came inside the house and was immediately shot in the head. Grant then attempted to stage the scene to give the impression that Cody had killed their parents before turning the gun on himself. Then after a full day of murder, Grant went to a hotel. The poor guy was probably knackered and felt he'd probably earned a chance to put his feet up. What a fuck trumpet. The next day, when Cody failed to show up for work, which he hardly ever did and would always call ahead if he was going to miss work, his co-workers became worried, and even more so when they could not contact him. So they felt it was serious enough to alert the police. Now, when the police got to the Amato home, they could not get any response from banging on the door and blowing an air horn. So they went inside, presumably covered by exigent circumstances, only to be met by a gruesome scene. Noticing that Grant was missing from the household, they tracked down Grant and took him in for questioning.
This is just released body cam video showing the moment Orange County Sheriff's deputies took Grant Amato into custody at a hotel.
You're being cooperative, sir. We appreciate that.
The man accused of killing 3 family members seemed so docile, so meek.
3 hours into the interrogation, he still hadn't asked what happened to his family or why he was there. Red flags, anybody? When confronted with pictures of his dead family, Grant teared up. Whether this was real or fake, we have no way of knowing, but still claimed he had nothing to do with it. Towards the end of the interrogation, the police played a different card, and this was one that was played to try to appeal to whatever emotions this selfish prick had. So it was that Grant's half-brother Jason came in to speak to him, but still Grant didn't budge. He wouldn't admit what he had done, but he was arrested on 3 charges of first-degree murder.
Came to get me on the 4th. I mean, I don't know the exact time.
Do you know where the paper is or what it's written on?
It's written on like a greenish yellow college rule, just piece of paper and pen.
In the office or bedroom? Or?
I don't know where he keeps all of his stuff.
All right. So what else do you and Cody talk about?
So then after talking about that, he says that he'll take care of it, and then him and my dad, they're the ones that always yell and raise their voices and everything like that.
So did your dad eventually enter the kitchen, or did Cody go to your dad in the office?
No, my dad came in when he heard that me and Cody were talking.
And what was the conversation then?
When they started to talk, I just left the room, and I just went back upstairs.
So you didn't hear what they talked about?
I mean, not in any. It was more just that he was defending that it's just, that I just did this, and that it's not like it's costing any money.
Were they yelling? Did they raise their voice? Or they were talking?
They were yelling.
Did you hear any threats or?
My dad had said that that everybody had agreed that if I had done this, that I would have to go. That there wasn't any more wiggle room or second chances or anything like that. And then, he came around to the base of the staircase, and then he told me that I need to go.
Your father did?
Yeah. And then I told him that I was just trying to pick up the last few things that I needed to. There was like a bag of a trash bag of like my clothes that I had still not unpacked from when I got back from Cornerstone, that I just, I had to gather and put into my car, all that, just random stuff. And then, I don't know what time I actually left, but I think it was closer to like midnight or something.
And when you left, where was your mother?
When I left, my mom was still just in her office.
And where was your dad?
Dad and Cody were just yelling inside the kitchen.
So when you left, you heard them yelling?
Not really yelling anymore, but they were. It was basically just the same exact conversation that had been going on, where there was nothing left, and then Dad looked through some of my things to make sure that I wasn't taking anything that wasn't mine. I think the only thing that he had a problem with was that I had taken like some of my paperwork bills from like the Chapman Law Group, but then since I wasn't the one paying for it, that they would need those, but then I still just ended up keeping it because I figured nothing else was going to be covered for me or anything. So then after I left, I took the Fort Christmas Road that connected up with 50, and then I was just at the Publix for the rest of the time.
The same Publix we talked about earlier on
Really?
419. So from about midnight till 7 a.m., like you said, you were at Publix. And then is everything else the truth as far as the job interview and so on and so forth?
All the rest of the times were accurate, and when I looked at the site, I only saw a small blurb.
So when did you learn that your family was dead?
I had been worried since last night when I was just in the hotel, but I knew when you guys told me. I mean, like, I knew when you guys had told me.
You already knew, though.
But I had...
You already said, you know.
At any point, did you feel like you needed to reach out to Cody and see if he was okay, or?
I just didn't want to call anywhere. I just didn't want to know.
Alright, so I take it you know what happened.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you plain out. You are not part of it anyway.
No.
When was the last time you saw everybody?
I left the house between like midnight and like 12:30.
On Thursday night? So Friday morning?
Thursday going into Friday.
Why? That's when you went to a hotel?
No. The first night I stayed just in the Publix parking lot by the Tractor Supply.
Okay.
And
why did you leave, though?
His Dad had kicked me out Thursday because I was still talking to the woman that had caused everything, and I was using Mom's cell phone to do that with her knowledge, but not Cody or Dad's. So then Dad found out somehow, and that was one of the things that he had said would lead to my being removed from the premises.
So he basically told you you had to leave?
Yeah.
Okay. So who could have done this?
I don't...
So you didn't have any problems or troubles with this woman or the online? You didn't owe him any money?
No,
I mean, there's no like loan shark out looking for you or...
No.
I just don't see how things aren't adding up.
The nature of this abhorrent family annihilation and the seedy reasons behind it ensured that there was huge media and public interest in the case. And indeed, when things proceeded to trial, the death penalty was on the table, since the family had been killed for financial gain, or at the very least financial freedom, as it were. And Grant Amato's trial began on July the 15th, 2019.
Grant Amato seemed to have the picture-perfect upbringing. Born in 1989, Grant was the youngest of 3 boys, raised by his father, Chad Amato, and his mother, Margaret Amato, a close-knit family living in this home in Chuliota, Florida. Grant graduated from college with his nursing degree in 2011 and began working in the nursing field in 2012. He was closest to his older brother, Cody, an anesthesiologist. Grant planned to enter the same field and enrolled in Barry University's anesthesia program for graduate school. But in the summer of 2018, his life seemed to make a sharp turn. While working for a hospital in East Orlando, co-workers reported Grant Amato to police. Hospital employees believed he was suicidal and allegedly stealing vials of sedative drug propofol. Amato was arrested and booked into jail for grand theft on June 21st, 2018. After being released on bond, Grant spent a lot of time at home and online. During his time on the web, he became tangled in love with a Bulgarian video model from a camgirl website. In November of 2018, Chad and Margaret discovered the costly affair. Grant spent over $200,000 on his online girlfriend, money police say he stole from his parents and brother Cody. The family does not press charges, and they want to get Grant help. Brothers Grant and Cody get away to Japan in December of 2018. But when he returns, the family realizes he's still obsessed with Sylvia Ventislavova. They urge him to enter rehab in Fort Lauderdale on December 18, 2018. Grant agrees to a 2-month program, but he decides to leave early on January 9th. His desires for the alluring Bulgarian model don't subside. In a letter written on January 22nd, he proclaims his undying love, saying, quote, "I care for her deeply and wish for an actual second chance with her." It's 2 days later that the timelines for the state and defense deviate. The state alleges Grant was at home alone with his mother Margaret around 4:30 p.m. on January 24, 2019. While sitting at her computer in the home office, prosecutors say Grant shot her, execution style, from behind. The defense says that account does not fit the evidence. Grant admits to being in the home, but says no one was hurt when his father kicked him out of the house. The state then believes Grant's next victim, his father Chad, arrived home from work as a pharmacist around 5:30 p.m. Crime scene analysts say Chad was shot twice in the kitchen. Hours later, Cody comes home between 9:30 and 10 o'clock p.m. Prosecutors say Grant placed shell casings from Cody's gun around the 3 bodies and placed the gun near his brother's head.
What the defendant did in this case is he staged a murder-suicide scene. The 4 shell casings that were found in the house were in fact ejected from the gun found near Cody, but the bullets that were recovered that killed the victims were not fired from that gun.
There are also digital records between Chad and Cody's cell phone at 11:41 p.m. and 12:31 a.m. The defense says this activity proves the family was still alive and that the state's timeline of events is flawed. After leaving the scene of a massacre, the state says it's after 12:27 a.m. that Grant Amato travels to a Publix parking lot to log on to the Wi-Fi. And at 2:08 a.m., he uses Cody's bank account to buy more tokens for Sylvia's Camgirl website.
Cody then came into the house and Grant saw Cody in the kitchen. Grant then left his dad and Cody as they were talking downstairs. Grant went upstairs to transfer files to his flash drive, something that the state had brought up earlier. Then Cody came into the room while Grant was transferring the files. At this time, Cody gave Grant his debit card for anything Grant needed to take care of himself while Cody tried to smooth things over.
The next morning, a neighbor tells police he heard a gunshot from the Amato home around 9 a.m. the morning of January 25th. The bodies of Chad, Margaret, and Cody Amato are discovered by police during a wellness check at 9:17 a.m.
No white Honda.
25 miles away at 10 a.m., Grant Amato is being interviewed for a job by Express Scripts. At 2:47 p.m., he checks into the Doubletree Hilton Hotel, which is where police find him the following morning on January 26th and bring him in for questioning. 2 days later, on January 28th, the state charges the 29-year-old with 3 counts of murder.
Things progressed through, and on August the 9th, individuals were asked to testify as part of the penalty phase, with 3 people testifying on each side's behalf. But notably, Grant's half-brother Jason testified against him.
Let me wish you a good morning.
Good morning.
Please tell us your name, and would you spell your first and last name?
My name is Jason Amato, and it's Jason, last name Amato.
And Mr. Amato, can you please tell us where do you live? And if you prefer to give city, town, county, that's fine.
I live in Winter Springs, Florida.
Now, Grant Amato, do you know a person by the name of Grant Amato?
Yes, he's also my brother.
And same question, did you know Grant Amato your entire life?
Yes, sir.
Do you see Grant Amato in the courtroom today?
Yes, sir. He's.
Stand up to look around.
Well, no, I know where he is. He's right there.
Could you identify him? Is he
Yeah,
the
he's
person
in the
that's standing
purple.
up?
Yes, sir, in the purple tie.
Okay, please let the record reflect that Jason Amato has identified the defendant, Grant Amato, in this case. Is that the original document, the original rules or contract that you discovered in your father's office upstairs?
Yes, this is the piece of paper that I found upstairs.
Same condition as it was in when you discovered it?
Yes, sir.
I'd offer this into evidence as a state's exhibit, Your Honor.
Subject to the court's or our prior motion, Judge.
All right. Well, the objection would be overruled. As to 6P, that's what's been pre-marked for identification as 6P will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 179 in evidence.
Let me show you the document, and I'm showing you State's Exhibit 179 now. Let me show you the document. It's quite detailed, so I'm not going to ask you to read it word for word, but describe to the jury what that document is, State's Exhibit 179. What are the contents of it?
I guess I would call it like an ultimatum. Some options that were given to Grant to choose between after leaving the facility, and based off of some of his choices, there were specific rules and regulations that my father had laid out for him. And
give some example. I mean, I'm not asking to read the entire document. The jury has it. It's going to go back with them, and they can read it. But give the jury some examples of what are the options given to him.
all right, so the first thing that was covered was living arrangements. You know, does he want to live at home, move out on his own, go to the military? Looks like my father pre-wrote this and then updated it with a different color pen, I'm assuming with discussion with Grant. So
When you left, did all four of you leave together?
yes,
And then where did you go?
we just went straight home. It was obviously a school night, so kids had to go to bed so they could go to school, and I had to go to work, so it was school night, so I had to go home.
And then when you got home, what did everyone do?
Well, my daughter, our oldest daughter is in the IB program, and she's got tons of homework, so I think we did a little bit of homework for a couple hours. Our youngest daughter maybe laid around, went to bed, and then Christina probably went to bed shortly after getting home as well.
Okay. And then the morning of the 25th, did you get up and go to work?
Yep, normal day, I took Krista to school, and I think I just went straight to work from dropping her off at the high school.
Now, on that day, on that Friday, January 25th, did the police come to you?
Yes.
And tell the jury about that. About what time that morning did they arrive?
They arrived around 12:30, but I was initially communicated or contacted around 9:30 in the morning. I got a phone call from a person that I thought was part of the hospital that I later learned was a police officer. Needless to say, they're the ones that initiated that Cody didn't show up for work.
Now, let me ask you, were you at work? You mentioned that you worked in Maitland?
Yes, sir.
You were in Maitland when the police came over to your workplace?
Yes, they met. Yes, sir. They came to my work.
And how long Well, kind of tell us what happened then. The police made contact with you sometime afternoon.
It was pretty scary. So they, came into the building and the whole building got shut down and there were police officers everywhere. They took me into a room and, questioned me and later gave me very general details that there was a woman and 2 males in their 30s found in the house. So I just tried to answer. No, I'm good. So I just tried to answer their questions as best as possible. And they questioned me for, I was with them all day, but they initially questioned me for a couple hours, and then they went and searched my car in the parking lot for a couple hours, and then they went and searched my house for a couple hours. So, during that whole time, I was with the investigators all day, and they were constantly asking me questions, just tendencies about my parents and brothers and stuff.
The time period, how's Grant doing?
Yes, sir.
Checking on his well-being?
I talked to her 3 or 4 times after Grant had gotten out of the facility.
And that was in January?
Yes, sir.
Early January. And I don't want to ask you what your mom said, but was it your feelings that the family was coming together and you were going to get through this?
Yes, she did sound better than she had in the previous months. She said that Grant was being more part of the family and had a job interview and was excited that things looked like they were turning around. So, I was excited too, but still called, once a week or so to check in on the family.
And that was great news for you to hear, wasn't it?
Yes.
And that job interview that you referred to, that would be the job interview at the Express Scripts, I think on 125?
I believe so. She told me he had a job interview the Friday after we had last talked, which was on January 16th. And then, so that would have been the Friday before the incident. And then I guess he had another job interview on that January 25th, the Friday after the incident.
Yes, sir. And Jason, once again, I'm very sorry I have to ask you these questions.
It's okay, I understand.
Okay, I don't have any further questions this time. Thank you, sir.
Redirect?
Yes.
The prosecutors for the state of Florida informed the judge that they intended to seek the death penalty. But the jury did not unanimously agree to sentence Amato to death. But this still resulted in an automatic sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Based upon this case, 2019 CF 337 CFA, the state of Florida versus Grant Amato, you've been found guilty of 3 counts for killing both your mother, your father, and your brother, Margaret Amato, Chad Amato, and Cody Amato. At this point, you've been found guilty by a jury of your peers who have now indicated that you are not to be sentenced to the death penalty. Based upon those circumstances, the court is limited to 1 finding and 1 sentence for you. As to each count, the court would adjudicate you guilty. I would sentence you to life imprisonment without any possibility of parole as to each count. I further would indicate that you are to be released to the Department of Corrections as soon as feasibly possible. And otherwise, sir, just God have mercy on your soul.
On August the 12th, Grant Amato was found guilty of all 3 counts of first-degree murder, receiving a life sentence without parole for each. When asked if he felt remorse, Amato, probably unsurprisingly and narcissistically, responded with, "My family has been blaming me for months for ruining their lives, stealing, and not following the rules of the home. So I might as well be blamed for this too." What a whiny, privileged, entitled, narcissistic cockwomble. He was sent to and remains at Okeechobee Correctional Institution, and long may he rot there. And that was the case of Grant Amato, who killed his family over his obsession and addiction to a cam girl he had never even met. His selfish needs came first, ahead of anything else. And he was willing to end the lives of those closest to him, the people who had gone over and above in trying to support him, just to get what he wanted. He was, and presumably still is, a total cockwomble. Chad, Margaret, and Cody Amato only ever wanted the best for Grant. They were unbelievably caring and remarkably generous with their money and their time. It is the ultimate example of biting the hand that feeds. They were astonishing in their unshakable support for a man that did not deserve it, as he showed time and time again. This video is, of course, dedicated to the Amato family, with one rather obvious exception. They deserved so much better, and I truly hope that they are at peace. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. Please hit that subscribe button and the like button too. It apparently does something to the algorithm, so I am told. And feel free to comment and let me know your opinion on this case. I'd love to know what people think, and I read absolutely every comment. But with all of that said, I'm Steve. This fluff burger is Samson, isn't it? Yes. And we will see you when we see you.